NANI?
Oui, oui, baguette. Bisous.
French people, am I right? I mean, what's the big deal? There's the leptospirosis cooked man, phallic bread, lack of showers, amazing house music, beheading. Wait, what was that one? Daft Punk, the French artist to end all French artists. I mean, which other artists from there can say that they have their own anime? I will be brief. I'm pretty sure at this point everyone is pretty well aware of Daft Punk's influence, and how important they are not only for French house but for electronic music in general. So why the hell I never heard the whole album by them? To be honest, I don't know. Of course I'm familiar with their big songs. I mean, damn it, I had internet in the late 2000s. Of course I've seen Daft Hands before. But the albums just sort of were there for a huge while of my life. Until these comebacks came in my life. Recently, I've been in a huge electronic phase. More specifically trip-hop. Artists like Uncle, Hooverphonic, Portishead are pretty much all I've been listening to in the past few months. And it's gradually spreading to other genres of electronic, like IDM, downtempo, big beats, and house, with artists such as Boards of Canada and Goldfrapp, to name a few. So this is basically the perfect opportunity for me to get into some Daft Punk. Their music might be way more upbeat than the artists I've mentioned, but regardless, my taste buds for electronic stuff are getting wiser. Maybe in the future, I will learn to get into 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖘𝖍𝖆𝖑𝖑 as well. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting too ahead of myself now. Where was I even going with this? Yeah. Ranking every Daft Punk album after listening to them for the first time. Let's go! Also, quick thing I forgot to mention, I'm including 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃 in the ranking as well. I generally focus on the studio stuff, but since 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃 is such an integral part of Daft Punk's discography, I just felt like it needed to be included here. Now, actually let's go. Human after all? In last place! What's next? T-Pab topping Kendrick's list? If you are at all familiar with Daft Punk, it sure is no surprise that Human After All is a title that has a way bigger purpose than just being the name of one of the songs on the album. Listen to it and you'll be like, yeah, they are human after all, they make mistakes and this is one of them. But for real, it's kinda stunning how inferior this album is in comparison to every other thing they've released. It's not bad, but it's the closest thing to middling that 𝕑𝖃 has. Simply put, the songs are one-trick ponies of the worst kind. The game this album plays is, okay, nice hook, how long will it take until they repeat this enough times to get stale? There are barely any changes to the structure of the songs, and when there are, they tend to be very underwhelming, and make me feel like this image. For example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Robot Rock, right? It's the song that goes... Okay, good. If you never heard the whole album or even the whole song, I'm sure you like the hook and all, but maybe not enough to listen to it for 4 minutes and 47 seconds straight. Oh wait, never mind, they do this in the middle of the song. Life-changing. But at least Robot Rock has a good hook. Now, what happens when you check some of the weakest songs on the record, like Steam Machine? That's a weird way to spell irrelevant. But that's not to say the album doesn't have its highlights. The second single, 𝑇echnoLogic, is one of the few moments in the album that doesn't feel as repetitive. And that's something, considering this track is notable for using the word "it" 350 times exactly. But I think the beat changes are consistent throughout, and it's definitely a highlight. And there are some other tracks that manage to transform the overwhelming repetitiveness into an acceptable one, such as the title track and my personal favorite song on the album, 𝕬𝖆𝖵𝖃 Rules the Nation. The former having one of the best guitar riffs of the group's discography, and the latter being the best use of vocoder in the entire album. And if you know Daft Punk, you know that's one hell of a praise. As I said, the album isn't bad, but it's certainly mishandled. Sometimes it feels like it was made in a hurry, but when it shines bright enough to the point that it doesn't right the wrongs, but makes it still an experience worth revisiting. Good thing Human After All is the only album in their discography that was a letdown. From now on, everything I talk about is super solid stuff. And to start, let's go to the start of the band that I was starting in the start. Homework. You passed B+. In case I hadn't made this clear enough in the previous sentences, this is the group's debut album, and that certainly feels like how a proper debut album should sound. It shows everything we came to take for granted from Daft Punk's sound. Vocoders, repetition, strong drum beats, and awesome production. But it still feels very much like a debut. It's their first try, so of course it's flawed, verging on bloated, but with a lot of promise and a huge sign of things to come. Of course, everyone knows tracks such as Around the World and The Funk, but besides those, there are many other cool moments in the album. Rolling Scratching, Teachers, Burning, and my favorite track, Alive. These are all tracks I would love to hear playing in my local club if I had the disposition to go there. And another thing that is important to mention is the way the album handles repetition opposing to human after all. Remember how I mentioned that while 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖘 was still a repetitive track, there was enough background variation throughout to the point that it doesn't get us as tired? So, this album pretty much does that in a nutshell. It doesn't feel nowhere near as tiring to listen to, despite being half an hour longer than that album. And it only adds insult to injury in that record, because it shows the group already knew how to do things right. Homework is proof of that. It may have its fair share of weak spots, but it's still a pretty good album. Anybody being hunted down by Daft fans? Yeah, they already beheaded me. Oh, sick, same dude. Alright, some eyebrows might be raising now. To clarify, yes, this is in the podium, which means I did enjoy this a good deal. But I will be real, I feel like the expectations ruined this one for me. Prior to listening to this, nearly everyone I talked about during this video said to me stuff like, oh, you're gonna love 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃. 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃 is the GOAT and you're gonna die. Tell me what you think about 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃, and because of that, I had expectations of this thing becoming one of the best albums I've heard in my life. So when I got to it, I was underwhelmed. Based on the crowd noise in the album, it's clear everyone is having a blast, the mashups are extremely well put together, and the entire album honestly feels much shorter than what it is. But one of the things that I was expecting to feel going to this album is that it would transport me to that exact date in 2007, and it didn't. And if it did, it was at least 5 squares from the venue. If there's one thing to praise here, is to see how well these tracks are mashed up together. Not many artists manage to put their own unique twists in their performances and nail the result in flying colors. It almost makes me want to go full on Deadhead and just follow them around the country in every concert they do. And I say that because it's undeniable this thing would be as talented good in the flesh. But just listening to 𝕸𝖆𝖗𝖃 as a disc, honestly it just made me feel kinda left out of the party, like an intruder. I guess that for me, to truly feel this album, I'd have to see them live. And that's totally going to happen, right? Comedy, everyone! Out of these 5 albums, there are 2 I can truly say I adored. And since we are at number 2, this means we've reached them. And yeah, it's exactly those albums. I am so very original. Envy my originalness, you unoriginal freaks. Anyway, Discovery. This thing is excellent. Honestly, I could just say that and leave. It would have been impactful, but it would also be a disservice to the record. So here's why I love it. Remember homework? So imagine that and transform it into a graduate thesis. With anime. That's Discovery there. Pretty much everything wrong there is fixed here. Every single beat feels crafted with so much care and so much detail, like they spent millennia perfecting those perfect songs, until they can't get any more perfectly perfect. And it's not surprising that it feels like that. This thing took 3 years to get done, only proving that if an album stays for long enough in the working sheet, it's just brewing up to become a masterpiece. Right, you guys? It's pretty hard to pick just one favorite track here. Verdi's Quo is fantastic. I always loved Face to Face. The beat of Voyager is the stuff of legends. But I think my favorite is probably the good old classic Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. I don't know, man. There's just such an unequal charisma to that song. I don't think I'll ever hear another tune that blends in such slick, cool energy, and at the same time is super original and out there. Probably my favorite song in this whole journey. And as much as I think plenty of songs here are perfect, there were a couple of moments where it didn't land as hard. Like, I'm not crazy about Night Vision, and despite being a fan favorite, Superheroes is probably my least favorite song on the album. I just don't really care about that sample use. But honestly, that is the tiniest cloud, with a gigantic silver lining that pretty much becomes the cloud. So needless to say, I get the hype here. Alright, what a swan song we got here. Random Access Memories. Not gonna lie, I was not expecting this to be number 1 when I started doing this. But god! This new disco sound is so good. But it goes beyond that for me. From its conception, this feels not only like a tribute to disco music, but also a tribute to everything has inspired the band in the past. Listen to stuff like Contact and Doing It Right, for example. As much as it's a pretty different album in comparison to everything the band has done in the past, this still fits right in with their style. There's some more obvious hints, like the vocoders that are literally in your face everywhere in this album, but truly the album shines when it dives into the disco land. Of course, the singles Get Lucky and Lose Yourself to Dance are fantastic. But what about those deep cuts? Touch, Beyond, Fragments of Time, and especially Give Life Back to Music are some mental tracks. You can just feel the love for music exhaling from the pores of each of the musicians involved in this project. I don't think this was intended to be the last album the band would ever release at the time, but it certainly feels like the best way they could have gone to that. Tributing their past, tributing music's past, and pretty much tributing everyone that has even felt something listening to music. It does have weak spots. I particularly don't really care about The Game of Love, but it's indeed a mesmerizing send-off, and my favorite album in this entire journey. For a bunch of Daft Punks, they sure know how to blow our minds. But what about blowing themselves up? I stand corrected.